session today then is really about discussing the start of a clinical tax education in the UK, and I'm joined by Valerie from TaxAid and obviously David, because this is really a collaboration between the three of us to try and get this set up and to get it going in the UK. So it kind of started off as a bit of a discussion. I kind of saw a little bit about what was going on in Australia, so I kind of reached out to David and said, have you thought about doing a tax clinic? And he said, yes, I've seen all the stuff that's been going on in Australia. So we kind of had that dialogue between us. And we kind of eventually found ourselves getting in touch with TaxAid as a kind of collaboration for this project. So that's kind of the foundations of the model. So the purpose of today really is for me to kind of start to discuss what a tax clinic in the UK might look like and kind of try and scope out any points of discussion or obstacles or questions that you might have that we really need to think about before we get this going properly. So first point, so we drew a lot of our inspiration from Australia because there isn't an example of this in the UK. So this is going to be the first of its kind in the UK. So this kind of collaboration is truly kind of unique and original and hopefully very beneficial for both the students and our communities. Right then, so the model. So as I said, it's operating out of our universities, but it's really a collaboration with TaxAid. So the idea is that it will be based within the universities, the clinics themselves, so they're kind of going to be outreach posts which the public can engage with either over the telephone or they can come onto campus and see our students that way. So the students who are primarily at this point going to be final years or postgraduates will kind of man a helpline, so a TaxAid helpline, and will have the opportunity to conduct client interviews. So part of that process is obviously that the students are then going to be researching and preparing basic tax advice for those clients who kind of come through that helpline. Obviously, we don't want to let out all the students straight away, so they're going to be thoroughly trained by both the universities. So they're going to have conducted and completed a tax module during their studies at the university, and they're also going to engage in additional training provided by TaxAid. So the idea is that we're really trying to prepare these students the best we can for the sort of things that they're going to be doing in the clinic. So beyond that, they're going to be trained, but once they actually get into the clinic, they're very much going to be supervised by university staff. So in the first instance, David and I, and also hopefully by local professionals. So one of our big concerns when we kind of thought about this idea was how can we maintain the quality of the advice that these students will be providing to their clients. And one of the ways that we thought of this is that we're going to obviously have kind of strict supervision of the students at all times. Just to make sure that the advice that they would be preparing and what they're saying and how they're interviewing and talking to clients, we can maintain that kind of mark of quality in the tax clinic. And obviously a massive benefit of collaborating with TaxAid is that if we do get a case that is too technical, too difficult, too long, or just simply too arduous for our students, because tax is complicated, and some of the things that could come through the door could be just beyond the capabilities of our students. We can draw on TaxAid for that expertise there. The pilot then, so we've decided instead of fully rolling out the clinic straight away, we're going to conduct a pilot. We thought we'll scope out the problem areas, scope out the obstacles, and we'll just try and get a good idea as to whether this is something that would work in the UK, because the model is quite different from the Australian models, and we just wanted to make sure that this is something that is possible and that the advice that the students are giving is of a good quality and that we're having a positive impact on the communities that we're helping. So we're running a pilot. And that pilot's going to run from 10 weeks. For 10 weeks, from January 2020. So it's looming. There's not much time to prepare for it. We've still got to recruit our students, train our students. But the hope is come January 2020, when they start their studies again, towards the end of January, we're going to open the doors to the tax clinic for the first time. So as it's a pilot, we're going to keep it quite small. So it's running for quite a short period of time, 10 weeks, one term at Lancaster University. And we're also going to keep the numbers of students that are getting involved quite small. So we're going to be looking at probably somewhere between 10 and 15 students, maybe initially for the pilot. So that's students from UCLan and Lancaster University. Because one of the benefits of having this collaboration is David's accounting and finance students can work alongside my law students. So we really have that kind of sharing of expertise between the students, because the two different types of students will have different strengths and abilities and skill sets. So it's initially going to be based out of Lancaster University, simply because we have an established law clinic infrastructure at the university. So we have the kind of client interviewing rooms, we have video calling capabilities, we have basically kind of a mini call centre already set up for the existing law clinic. So the idea is that the tax clinic can kind of, for a pilot anyway, run out of that. Obviously, difficulties is we can set up a pilot for a tax clinic all we want, but if no one comes through the door, then the students aren't going to be advising anyone. So it's really going to be a bit of a frantic media campaign for David and I. We're going to be engaging with the local media, so local radio stations, newspapers, trying to kind of garner enough interest and awareness that this free tax advice is going to be available for this quite small window, really, initially for the pilot. We did do that at Lancaster for our relaunch of our law clinic, so there was quite a frantic engagement with media for a short-term law clinic over the summer, and it worked really well. So we did get a good number of clients walking through the door for that law clinic. So the hopes is that that's a little bit transferable, and obviously the unique nature of this, the limited availability of free tax advice should mean that there are people who need that advice and will come to us during that pilot. And as I said before, it's basically our way of seeing whether this is possible, whether this works in the UK. So it's an evaluation exercise. It's an opportunity for us to identify any obstacles, difficulties, and just generally kind of evaluate the performance of the programme. So I'm going to talk now about the benefits for law students, and then David's going to chip in with the benefits for his accounting and finance students, because there's obviously slight differences between the two types of student on the two different programmes. So for law students in particular, for those looking to go into the legal profession after their law degree, it's really good for them to get the hands-on experience that they'll be using as lawyers in the future. So I've just put a few examples on the screen there. So for example, interviewing clients, it's a skill that most students won't actually acquire during their degree. Communication, so they're going to have to talk to one another, they're going to have to talk to the accounting students, they're going to have to kind of talk to local professionals, and students aren't necessarily good at talking to people. So the hopes is that we're going to get them out of their comfort zone and having to have those conversations and communicate with people who they would not normally have to communicate with. So we're going to try and bring them out of their bubble a little bit. And obviously linked to that is kind of professionalism. They're going to hopefully be working with local professionals, and they're going to be the point of contact for the clients, so they're going to have to be professional. And they're going to have to learn what it means to be professional in this environment. And specifically for law students as well, the kind of the preparation process of giving advice. So they're going to have to research the problem and then formulate that into advice that is easily understood by their client. And that, again, is a transferable skill that is quite difficult to come by unless you do clinic work or good work experience during your degree. And I guess all of those skills kind of feed into the problem that law schools and law students are having at the moment, and that's employability. So kind of developing our students so that when they finish their degree, they are employable and desirable, and they have those skills that make them good employees when they step into the world of work. So obviously, specifically for the students' eyes, this is going to be a great thing to add on to their CV. So they're going to kind of engage with that on that level. And I thought quite interesting for law, so it might be different in different law schools, but from my experience, tax is not necessarily a career that lawyers think about, certainly initially. So there might be a few that go on to be kind of tax lawyers, so specifically kind of solicitors in big firms, but I've had conversations kind of with the Big Four, and they don't really get many law students applying for positions there. So it could kind of open up doors to careers that they may not have considered in the first place. And I'm going to pass on to David.
So I'm not mic'd up, so I'll just... this is a particular problem for accounting, or I feel it's a problem with accounting. There's a whole load of us now offering ACCA master's degrees, churning out exam-qualified postgrads with no experience and who find it difficult to obtain employment. With that, ACCA itself has hundreds of thousands of affiliates, ones that they've shoved through the exams with promises of jobs, or holding out the expectation, and they're just not there with those. And so when I think this is the soft skills, yes, we all say our students don't have those skills, but it's a bit vague as to how do you do it. And what I'd want to try and do is, can we use the clinical experience to actually meet very specific objectives that one of the accounting bodies says? That, because it's all very well saying you've got to have 3 years experience, and we're not going to offer much in terms of time, but if we can get some of those professional experience requirements, which can be hard to sign off because somebody's got to have seen you do the whole breadth of work there. So it may not be much in terms of time, but if we structure the work that we're doing and recognise what they're doing so we can get those boxes ticked, and it won't just be a box ticking exercise, but when you log on, there is a box to tick for that, that we're very focused on which of the skills we're going to make sure that they develop out of this. And Lancaster is in a very different league to UCLan, certainly as far as accounting goes. Or we're in the same league, but we're way apart with that. And I think we have some very capable students here, but we suffer the problem that just because it's UCLan, they don't get through the SIFT. Or they come to us and they've not particularly performed well at A-level, or they've done BTEC, or whatever. So our capable students aren't even getting to the interview stage. But when you see them face to face, I mean, you saw 3 this week. We had a couple entertaining guests at the dinner, and I was impressed with them. I think I'd consider employing them, but until you've actually seen them, if you see them on paper, you may not interview, but if you've seen them in work, you've worked alongside them in the tax clinic, I think there's a good chance they then get maybe not a job with the person supervising them there, but they will get a recommendation somewhere else. That will be the long-term view, but we'll test out in the pilot whether actually the work would suit developing those and actually being able to say it's not just soft skills, it's very particular soft skills that do meet these requirements there. That would be the plan.
Thank you, David. Let me get my clicker. Excellent. And obviously, this is an education day, so I started off with the benefits to students, and we've kind of discussed the benefits to students, but one of the core benefits of having a tax clinic in the Northwest is that it will be hopefully a massive benefit for the community. So as I said, free tax advice in the Northwest, as far as we are up here, it's not readily available. So what that means is it gives obviously an opportunity for people who would not otherwise be able to access tax advice, an opportunity to talk about their tax problems. Obviously, in terms of engagement, it's an opportunity for the universities to give back to their local communities and offer something in return for everything that they take. And in terms of education speak, a great opportunity for knowledge exchange. And that knowledge exchange will actually take place between the students and the public. So it's not necessarily the academics that are going to be having these conversations with the people who need the advice. It's going to be the students who are talking to the public. So it's quite a rare opportunity for that knowledge exchange to take place in a slightly different way to how we normally talk about it. Valerie's going to have a quick talk about TaxAid at the end of the presentation. But other benefits, obviously, is that TaxAid doesn't have a massive presence up in the Northwest. We're a little bit further away from London. And what we're hoping is that we can kind of get local practitioners involved with this tax clinic, so we can encourage and raise the profile of TaxAid and get some of our local professionals involved in the project. Benefits of that obviously will massively benefit the students, so they're going to be networking with professionals that they might not otherwise have networked with, and of course it means that the quality of our advice can be more assured with that supervision from local practitioners. And indirectly, if there's a bigger presence in the Northwest, then we could see more support for TaxAid in terms of indirect financial support. And I've kind of put this last slide up because David and I are really quite keen to think of ways in which we can get the local professional involved. So is there really a role for local practitioners in this project? And we think so. We think that there is definitely a role because they can provide key supervision for our students. And as I said before, it offers that opportunity for the students and the professionals to work together, enhancing the students' skills, but it also gives an opportunity, hopefully, for local practitioners to give back to the community through TaxAid in a way that might not have been possible before, just because of our location here in the Northwest. So before I pass on to Valerie then, in particular, we would be grateful if you can kind of think of any challenges you might think we would encounter during this project, whether we can overcome these challenges, because we've tried to put our heads together and think of things that we need to put in place to make sure this runs smoothly and that we're providing a quality service to the community, but sometimes you don't think of everything. And of course, these things need to be funded, so if you do have any ideas on that front, then do share. Can I pass over to you, Valerie?
Hello, I'm Valerie Boggs. I'm the Advice Director at TaxAid and also at sister charity Tax Help for Older People. And it's great to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. And really excited about this project to provide tax clinics here. TaxAid and Tax Help for Older People are two charities, have been in existence for 16 and 26 years and providing support and tax advice to people who need it. And we determine those who need it as those who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford tax advice. So it's typically people who are perhaps in a low income, some elements of vulnerability, maybe around their personal circumstances, or mental or physical health issues. That advice is primarily accessed by people calling our helpline. And generally people will get to know about our helpline when they go for help. Perhaps they'll go to their Citizens Advice office or access help through Age UK. Places they might go for support, and those advice agencies should know about the charities. Getting awareness right is very difficult to do because if you advertise widely, then you just get swamped with calls that you can't possibly take. And that's always a concern for us. But an equal concern is that people simply don't know that we exist and they don't know that there's help out there for them when they have got tax issues. So there was two things I was thinking of in terms of one of the questions you might have is what type of tax advice are we giving? What are we expecting to see? And what we're not expecting to do or provide support with is for somebody who wants to start a business is thinking, what structure is this going to be and how do I manage that in a tax efficient way? What we're looking and expecting to see are people who have issues around how they're managing their tax and they don't know how to resolve it. And at TaxAid, what we see are people who are now engaged to work in very different ways to where we were maybe 20 or 30 years ago. We don't have people now in PAYE for 30 years to a large extent. We have people working from contracting, there's 0-hour contracts, through personal service companies, through the job centre who says you're going to be self-employed because we need you off the Job Seekers Allowance. And so a myriad of different ways that people are now engaged within the labour market. And what that does is create a huge challenge for sometimes people with the lowest literacy skills, the lowest backup in their own family and friendship groups, because they don't know how to manage the paperwork that goes with that. Sometimes that can be the numeracy skills let them down. Sometimes they don't understand the paperwork that comes from HMRC. Sometimes they will move on in where they're living or not have somewhere to live. They lose track of the obligations they have with HMRC, and they end up with considerable tax debt. And that's a very common issue that we see, is unscrambling that tax debt and that cycle of obligations that they have with HMRC. What TaxAid and Tax Help for Older People can do is sit down with somebody. We have a network of around 500 volunteers between the two charities. And I know we're not visible in the northwest, but northeast, but we can cover any area in the UK and in Scotland and Wales as well. And even some in Northern Ireland, they have their own system there, Advice NI, that provides a lot of support for people with tax issues. But we can sit down with our volunteer and the person who has the problem. We can work through the paperwork that they have with HMRC. We can contact HMRC to understand the facts from their perspective, because sometimes how somebody perceives the problem and the reality of the problem can be two very different things. So we will contact HMRC and try and understand what the problem is and then work through it. So sometimes that's preparing returns, sometimes it's preparing appeals, so it's completing paperwork, and it can mean we get to a point where it is enabling somebody to manage the debt they have with HMRC, or there are occasions where what we're doing is negotiating with HMRC because somebody's in hardship and they can't and will not be able to afford the debt they have with HMRC. And that can range from a few £100s, and we deal with people who are facing bankruptcy with tens of thousands with HMRC. So it's a full range of issues that we see, and our resolution is always focused on enabling that person who has come to us to leave us and leave the support of our volunteers with their tax issue resolved, so that they can go on working and supporting themselves. Because often people come to us really when they should have looked for help 2 years ago, and they come to us maybe a bit late in the day, and we can lift that burden of the tax and HMRC that's on their back and enable them to continue in their work and relieve them from the frustrations of managing their taxes. So I think it's terrific to think that we can expand that service by this project to enable more people to be aware of the support that there is for tax support for those who can't otherwise access it, and to be able to work with the students. We have a pilot at Deloitte in London at the moment, and that's working with people who've just started with Deloitte. So in many ways not very far away from the students here who are participating in the pilot. And it's quite interesting in terms of we are anxious that we get the quality of the advice appropriate, that we equip people in the training and in the support that we can give them to make sure that they are being supported in the appropriate way, and that the advice is of the right quality and standard. So we have experience working with Deloitte to just see the level of training that's needed for that. And certainly I think one of the big feedback points we get from the Deloitte students is that it enables them to talk to clients. I think Deloitte in London, you go in, you get a little tiny desk and two very big screens, and it's heads down, and you don't get to relate to clients necessarily. And one of the great things about it is that you get to actually to speak to people who are incredibly grateful for the support that you're able to give them, and just work on those interpersonal skills that are so very important in the working life. So I think it's very exciting to be part of this project, and we're really grateful for the contact made so that we can support more people. The vision of the two charities is to provide tax advice to all those who need it, and I very much hope that in doing this and setting this up, that will enable us to manage to do that amongst more and reach more of the people who need us. Okay.